Welcome back to another episode here on the tutorial series. We were going to look today to how to craft things and how to smelt things automatically in the game. So let's start by looking at smelters. Smelters are made using this recipe, and the crafters, or better to say assemblers, and their new tiers are made like this. I have both already here. So in this case I have the smeltery here and I can place it down. Just like the storage, you can see white squares where the inputs are, but you can, for example, place multiple next to each other. When clicking on a factory building, you need to select the recipe. Using the white button on the left top, you can select the things it can make. In this case, I can use stone in order to make, for example, stone blocks, or I can use stone to make silicon ore. Let's just take a look at the what we're gonna do. Let's make silicon ore. You can see here it's now waiting for the silicon ore to go. A nice thing to note, if you ever want to build something but do not want to select the recipes for every building, you can always use the shift button and click on the building to copy it, including its recipe. So when you click a building with the shift button in, you can always copy it, including its recipe. So this thing needs stone, right? Let's pull out a belt, like we learned in the last episode, and put it aside of these factory buildings. Since we now know that the inputs we have for these buildings are 3 next to each other on every side, we can simply put a belt next to it, get a sorter and pull it in. When it's pulled in, you can see it now can accept stone. So let's just put some stone on the belt. And you can see it's being pulled into the smelteries itself. But since they do not have power yet, they are not doing anything. So let's place a Tesla tower here. And you can see they're all turning on. And when it has enough, it will start fabricating the silicon ore. Now we want to have a place to store the silicon ore we made. So let's place a container and some belts, and put the belts near the container. Now let's connect the belt to the container and get the output from the furnaces onto the belt. Since this is a factory item that only has a single output, it simply is dragging and dropping a sorter onto the output onto the belt. If there are multiple items, you can use the tab to switch out between which item to get out of the factory itself. Same thing for the input as well. There is a range around the factories where you can put things in. So in this case, I can also get it from this far into the building. Keep in mind, the further you are from the input slot, the more time it takes for each go to bring the items into the slot. So in this case, you can see 2.0 trips, which means it's way slower than, for example, here, where 6 trips per second. It can only do 2 times putting items into this system per second, and when you're next to it, 6 times per second, which is significantly faster, 3 times to be exact. As you can see here, once it's smelted, it will be put out on the belt, and the belt will bring it to the chest, where it's now collecting up. Amazing, isn't it? So, let's take a look at this. Let's get a crafting. I'm using the tier 2 crafters, but basically the assemblers. But they are basically the ones that you need if you want to do something advanced with it. So when I click on this one, you can see whatever we can make with different materials. There are a lot of things we can make. Currently, we cannot make anything with these crystals because we need to process them in a furnace once more in order to get through. So let me just craft a little bit of furnaces with it, and while it's being made, let's just drag a new line over here. But since I do not have enough belts, I need to get some belts. So be right back. Welcome back. Well, I had too low amount of belts, so I have made a little bit more belts. So let's just drag out a belt. And now the furnace is also made. Let's just put down the 3 furnaces as well. Make sure we have power over here by placing down a Tesla tower. And then make sure we have those items on the belt. You can see here the crystals are waiting, and we just put them in by dragging them into the furnace. We do not have to select the recipe before we do that. However, it would be easier to do so you know what to put in. In this case, we are gonna make the high purity silicon, which basically uses 2 crystals in order to make 1 pure silicon. And when I do it, it directly starts pulling in the crystals and making those high purity crystal bars. Now we need to store that as well. So same thing here. We just put a belt, drag our output from the buildings and into the storage again. Make sure it has power. And now we have the fabrication system going that makes crystals, then bars, and storing the bars. But we also can see that the speed is slowing down significantly. Why is that? Well, if you take a look at the right top of that screen, you can see we have an insufficient power supply, which means we do not generate enough power to have it running on full power. However, if I go to here and try to add some windmills to our power setup, just a few windmills, there we go. Now we should see that it's working on 100% again. Why? We increased the power output. And we can also see that the power is being generated and stored as well into the battery that we have placed down here. Which means we now have enough power to have everything going at full speed again. There's also one thing to note. Last time we made a splitter system. And as you can see, one of the storages is limited and is now full. So now every item that goes here will go directly into the other road because the first road is blocked. However, if I increase the limit again, it starts splitting out equally between both again. Keep in mind, as one small advice from me. If you pull down a belt and do not use the end of the belt, remove it. You can betterly use the belt somewhere where you can use it fully than leaving them hanging around on places where it's not used. For example, here we have the first one that's not being used. Simply removing it will give you 1 belt more to use on some other project, while the other projects are important than a belt that's not being used by anything. See? Now I have like 4 more belts. As you can see here, there are many things that we can make with different materials. Sometimes you need more than one material to make something. Let's take a look at one of the assemblers. An assembler is a building that can make machines and things put together. So in this case, let's take a look at, for example, this magnetic coil. The magnetic coil is made with empty magnets and copper ingots. Well, without making an entire system again that showcases how it's all being worked on, etc, etc, let's just make it manually. Let's put in magnets and some copper and make sure that it has some power. As you can see here, just like normally, it made 2 magnetic coils. But what I wanted to show you is when you input something into this building, because it requires 2 inputs, you need to have 2 inputs. So in this case, when I do this one over here, it can pick both items from 1 belt. But it's not optimal to do something like that, because the belt space is running out sooner or later, and if you want to have this continuously running and something is getting behind, then you have more items hanging around on the belt than it can use. So in this case, when you have like 20 copper bars here and just 1 coil, or magnet in this case, and it cannot reach the magnet, it will stop working. So I always recommend using 2 belts next to each other, one with ingredient 1, one with ingredient 2, and make the space differently from each other. So in this case, magnets, copper. When they are both here, they will simultaneously put items into the factory to work out. Outputting things from this factory is also not very hard to do. There is an exception though. When making some items, there is sometimes a chance you get multiple items out of the same building. This is not the case with this this assembler because it always has a single output. However, there is a chance with other buildings that are more advanced in the tutorial series. I will talk about those advanced machines later on. They will have multiple outputs, so you need to have multiple outputs out of the same thing. A good example of it, for example, we have this building. This is a factory building that outputs 2 resource type, copper and those purity silicon. If you want just to have the copper on one belt and silicon on the other belt, keep in mind just drag out, but press the top button to select which item to get out. In this case, you press silicon on one, copper on the other one. And as you can see here, this is how you get it on both belts. If you needed these two and place an assembler somewhere near it, you can use the separate belts into it for most optimum performance for what you are producing. That's it for this tutorial about how to smelt and craft things using the base automation. In the next episode we are going to talk about oil and purification of the oil. So, hopefully I will see you on the next time. Thank you all for watching, good luck!